my name is Mitzi Harding, and I've chosen for my famous psychologist assignment Doctors Kenneth B. and Mamie P. Clark. I chose them because they are African Americans. They are making a difference not only in the field of psychology, but in education, and last but not least, in constitutional law. Let me tell you a little bit about their credentials. Both Kenneth and Mamie Clark are PhDs in psychology. In 1940, Kenneth Clark earned his PhD in psychology at the University of Columbia. He was the first African American to do so. 3 years later, his wife, Mamie, followed him, and she obtained her PhD in psychology. She was the first female to do it and the second African American to do so. 3 years later, the Clarks started what we know today as the Northside Child Development Center in Harlem, New York. This particular center is world renowned. It is recognized all over the world because of its work. So the legacy lives on. The Northside Child Development Center was the first full-time child guidance center in Harlem to offer psychiatric, psychological, and casework services to children and families. One particular contribution was the center's intelligence testing services, which provided evidence to counter the public schools' misplacement of minority children in programs for the mentally retarded. Mrs. Clark served as the center director until her retirement in 1979. Though she is retired from Northside, their work still continues. And as we see right now, there are photos to show how it got started. This is one of the earlier photos of Northside Child Center that started from meager beginnings. As we can see, these are the founders, both Doctors Kenneth and Mamie Clark, and you see their motto or their mission, Northside Center, where children rise up and thrive. They made a book, they authored a book, Children, Race, and Power, together. You see a more contemporary photo of the people that they serve in that community and beyond. And this is an important photo because you see Kate Middleton from the royal family in England visiting Northside Child Development Center. So we do understand that it has garnered worldwide attention because of the great work that it continues to do even on today. One of their most renowned contributions was the doll test. And let's talk a little bit about the doll test. The doll test was a very simple test. And what it was is Kenneth and Mamie took 4 dolls, 2 black ones, 2 white ones. And they presented them to some children of color between the ages of 3 and 7 during a time when schools were segregated. As a matter of fact, they were under the Plessy versus Ferguson era, where you were separate but considered equal. And what the doctors were trying to prove was that any type of segregation, even if it's deemed to be equal, will create an inferiority complex in children that are outside of what is deemed as the system. So what they did was they took 4 dolls, 2 black, 2 white, and they asked the children from 3 to 7 which doll was the good doll, which doll was the bad doll, which doll was the pretty doll, which doll was the ugly doll. And most of the children chose the white doll. And the findings showed that the children understood, even at an early age of 3, 4, and 5 that they were conditioned to think that they were inferior, that their color was inferior, so therefore they chose the white dolls. As a matter of fact, this study was so conclusive in its findings that when the NAACP, Thurgood Marshall, and those people were contesting the segregationist laws, and they were about to bring forth Brown versus the Board of Education, they sought out the clocks specifically for their test results. And they were used as expert witnesses in regards to the Brown versus Board of Education. And in that ruling, as a matter of fact, Chief Justice Earl Warren made reference to the psychologist and the sociologist that noted that though the children were in a separated but quote-unquote equal environment, they were still not afforded due process under the 14th Amendment. And therefore, it was unconstitutional to be segregated solely on the base of race. And Warren, as a result, Chief Warren and all that was on the Supreme Court voted 9-0 to overturn the previous ruling of Plessy versus Ferguson that ruled separate but equal. Now it is against the law to segregate on the basis of race. And though that was cited back in 1954, there has been some strides that have been made. However, there is still much work to do. But we owe a lot of that to the Clarks and their test called the doll test. Why I chose them, why do I feel their work is important? Well, prior to this assignment, I had no references concerning African American psychologists and their contributions. As a matter of fact, I found very little information in our psychology book or in Harvard Community College's library concerning the Clarks, considering how profound the magnitude of their contributions actually were. The Doll study helped to change the Constitution of the United States and the entire education system. Their work continues today with their center and various other contributions. I could not find any verifiable objections or disputes to their work. It is extremely important to show and examine the diverse contributions of people of color in the field of psychology, which has often been and continues to be biased in its approaches to people of color. Finally, Doctors Kenneth and Mamie Phipps Clark are pioneers. They're the first African Americans to obtain PhDs in psychology from Columbia University. And they were the first to open up a full-time center that serviced minority communities in Harlem. And that work continues today. So that's why I chose Doctors Kenneth and Mamie P. Clark. Thank you.